Good evening, and again welcome to those who watch below. This is the penultimate night of our Halloween special. Got some fantastic narrators here tonight to help me with today's stories. So without further ado, let's begin. Don't bother trying to find it. You won't find anything about the name of the town or what happened here. This manuscript will be found long after the events that transpired in this place. But I hope against everything else that you're someone in a position of power. I pray to God himself that you can prevent this from ever happening again. But I don't want to give you too much credit. Like me, you are only human after all. They are not. They've been around for a very, very long time. Fat chance really. You probably wouldn't want that responsibility. And even if you did take it upon your shoulders to track them down, you can't single-handedly stop the children. Their manipulators are not on the grid. Whoever engineered this is in control of the world on a very disturbing level. This is what I want you to do. Read these pages, if they're still legible, and take from them what you will. Don't go on a wild goose chase, and realize that when you find this book, that it won't be in the place where I left it. They'll move it somewhere else to deceive you. I've left my mark on a tree there. Only then, when you see my name, will you know this is the place. You may have even heard of it in the history books, but be assured, any rumours on Wikipedia or Google pages that you pull up will be guesswork at best. None of them are even close to the truth. When you find the place, there may already be another town just like it. That's what I'm trying to stop. If we're not successful, then just realize, above all things, that evil exists. I'm not talking about bad people or tragic accidents. I'm talking about real, intelligent, ancient evil. It is calculated, and it is always one step ahead of you. Should you decide to take my place and become the paragon to prevent the corruption of the hearts and minds of children, I thank you in advance. I told you that I'm human. I lied. I used to be, before All Hallows Eve on that fateful night. I've been alive since then, far longer than any human being, and the reason is because I love children. I've always loved them in their purity and their innocence. That's why I was taken in by their ruse. That's why I finally decided to put all this down, centuries later. I won't be here much longer, and someone has to take up the burden. I've waited until I saw them return. They'll be back this year. They're planning the same thing again, and I can't stop them. Again, I can't expect that much from you. But I'm only giving you all this so you'll believe me. I have to be believable. If you think I'm crazy, you'll throw this in the garbage can, and more people will disappear. It's time to tell you what happened. I'm rambling. Back then, All Hallows Eve was the time for evil's ascension. You've all forgotten. If you left your house on that night in the old country, you were a devil worshipper. Halloween was not a term we used. We fled to the shores of this country because we were persecuted for our lifestyle choices. We worshipped nature, the changing of the seasons, the solstice of spring, autumn, winter and summer. In the purest sense of the word, we were druids. Our names and accents were English, but we were servants of the earth. We were some of the first to celebrate it as a holiday. The natives here were puzzled by our behaviour, but also frightened by it, and so they left us alone. They misunderstood. We were not the ones to be afraid of. At the time, I was relieved. They'd attacked us in our settlements time and time again, but as it drew closer to the end of October, they stayed away. Maybe in their own noble bonds with the earth and soil, they knew something terrible was on the horizon. They were right. John Hunter's little boy wanted to be a native, with a bow and arrow and a real headdress. Little Mary Taylor made a dress that was crafted after a local schoolhouse teacher's prettiest outfit. She idolised her educator, of course. They all had their get-ups. They were the first trick-or-treaters in what was to become the United States of America, 150 years later. We sent them out to frolic about the settlement, collecting apples and tarts and other sweet things into their burlap goodie sacks. There were no Snickers or Milky Ways, and yet the magic of this holiday held no less sway over them than it does the youth of our current time. They dress up as the Joker, the Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These children were their predecessors. I sent my daughter with Mary and John Hunter Jr. Despite our mistrust and wariness of the Anglican Church and the monarchs that presided over it, my little girl was dressed as the Queen of England. I refused to crush her fantasy world, and so I simply indulged her. We heard promises to return after sundown, say yes ma'am, and no sir, and not to linger too long if they were invited inside the households of our community. We didn't realise that the house on the edge of the settlement existed until we saw the children go inside. There were no lanterns or sources of light in the window, no fire or harvest dolls on the outside of the dwelling. As we sat in the middle of the town hall, imbibing in the pleasures of distilled moonshine, none of you will ever make it as potent as we did in those days, amongst our brethren. We watched our young ones gravitate across the middle of our town, to the foreboding household that had seemingly been constructed overnight. We gazed upon it. It seemed as though the place was shimmering. It pained my vision to look upon the building, as if my senses were being forced and propelled in another direction. Such a thing is difficult to put into words, but I seemed to be the only one who realised that our kids were all heading to the same place. When I questioned John Hunter, as if something was odd about their actions, he stared at me as if I was insane. "What do you mean?" he said. "There's no house there. They're going to play by the stockades." The sun had set by that point, but, as I said before, none of them were concerned. The natives hadn't shown up for weeks. I decided to walk to the phantom dwelling that only I and the children could see, to peer inside and see who these new settlers were, and why it called to the youths as if it was a black hole in a sea of stars. I tried to stand outside, to look through the window, but when I saw what was happening, it was too late. I breached the doorway with my buck knife drawn, but there was nothing about the things inside that I could harm with a weapon. There's something deep inside of us, something embedded within the human spirit, that's perfectly aware when we encounter something truly terrible. Fear, horror, evil, revulsion. It all hits you in a spastic wave, like a fierce exploding bullet that shatters the innermost parts of your soul with a relentless and powerful fury. I saw it in that moment, standing in that darkened doorway. They weren't people, and they weren't spirits. They were halfway there, lingering over the unconscious bodies of my daughter and her peers in their hooded black robes of half-existence. There was one, in particular, who made me feel as though my eyes would pop like as though my eyes would pop like ripened cherries when I stared at it. It was the leader, the source of that tug, that pull, and it was slowly fading, disappearing like a gaseous black cloud of death through my little girl's nostril and mouth. She was gasping for air, as if every breath after the one that preceded it was filled with acid, as if she was hungry for real, fresh air in her small lungs. With every breath, the figure faded deeper into her, along with the rest of them. I wish I could say that I was a hero, and that I hacked them all to bits. I wish I could say that I saved the day and made Halloween a night when the worst thing that children have to worry about is poisoned candy, It didn't happen. There was one of them left, floating toward me on elongated, blackened tendrils of shimmering nothingness. And by all real means of my imagination, it shouldn't have been there. But it was. And soon, it was going inside of me. The last thing I saw were their little feet, scurrying out of the phantom house and into the town. I felt that something terrible was about to happen. I had no idea. Everything went black, and then I was outside of myself. I was conscious, but observing my feet and my hands, doing things beyond my own scope of physical control. They led me and our children into the meeting hall, where of course the kids were embraced by the open, loving arms of their parents. I witnessed the betrayal, the brutal moments in which the truth instilled by the love for family and offspring would transform into a cause for the destruction of our village. They absorbed them. There was no better adjective for what happened. One moment they were there, and seconds later there was nothing but dark essence, filtering in through the eyes and noses and mouths of their devil children. It was over in minutes. A night that should have been a celebration of nature, of the seasons, had turned into the end of everything that we knew and loved here in our new land. I started to fight it. The kids knew. The moment I began to resist, to try and reclaim my limbs and mind from the corrupting influence within, their heads snapped back from their feast of souls to survey me in my struggle. My daughter's eyes were sunken, black pools of the abyss, devoid of any emotion, any semblance of the bright-eyed stare that she once held for me in all her love and adoration for her father. I miss that the most, really. The way she'd run to me when I came in from the fields every evening as the sun went down. I lived for it. What reason do I have to live now, other than to find her and stop them? I'm incapable. That falls on you, my friend. They took the part of my daughter that still counts, the part that I loved and cherished, and turned her into a servant. You ask me why I'm still alive? And again, it's because I love her so very, very much. Her body is a hollow shell, filled with the malefice and blackness of evils beyond our world. The black-robed things have grown as centuries have passed. They are from some place that is not of this world, but their urgency, their hunger to devour and destroy is insatiable. It's an exponential amplifying contagion on mankind, and All Hallows Eve is their pinnacle, their Christmas. I've done my best to warn you throughout history, to leave my mark in places where their desolation has left nothing but dust on the wind and empty houses. A deserted football field in a Texas ghost town, a card room in the back of a nightclub in Chicago, right under the nose of civilization, Roanoke Island, North Carolina, before John Rolfe found it in the aftermath. The thing that I expelled through sheer force of will alone has left me with an unusually long and empty life, devoid of anything but my desire for revenge. I have failed. I'm pleading with you. October 31st is not long away. My little girl, or what's left of her, is going to lead them to the same place. It's been refounded, except now it hums with sports utility vehicles and cell phones. I don't want this to happen to your child. Go to Roanoke and stop them from repeating the ritual. Those bodies they inhabit now are frail, on their way out. It's been almost 500 years. They need new ones on this Halloween. Look for a building that appears as though it shouldn't be there. It will be across from that very same tree where I signed my name, where I made my mark. I changed my title, named myself after the tribe of natives who knew it was coming, who perhaps tried to warn us, but for some reason we failed to heed or recognize their warnings. They were more closely attuned to the earth than us, And yet, they were still wiped out. Eventually. Trick or treat. Go now. You don't have much time.
Have you ever heard of a witch's circle? They're circles of stones that appear where witchcraft has taken place. Every Halloween, my friends and I would have a camp out in the fields at the back of our farmland and tell scary stories. My favorite used to be about witches and witches' circles, the best ones being that these circles were created from the souls of the dead. Every 1,000 years or so, a coven would become powerful enough to attempt to summon the devil. It would begin with the cursing of a stone. The first person to come across this stone would be possessed, and their mind would be filled with a hunger, a need to devour. Once they had eaten their fill, the person would awaken from their possession to find another stone would have joined the circle. Those that were possessed were always spared, but marked for life. The stones would then appear somewhere new, and the cycle would continue until the circle was complete. Once the circle was complete, the door would be opened. There was always a story in our village that Stonehenge was an attempt to not just open a door for the devil, but to throw open the gates of hell itself. The only reason it failed was due to a group of druids sacrificing themselves to keep it shut. Living on a farm in the middle of the English countryside had its perks and its downfalls. There are few things that can beat watching a summer sun set over fields of wheat, or the ability to walk for miles without hearing a single car, plane or train. There are, however, downsides to living in the countryside as well, the main one being isolation, and no night has that been more apparent than this one. My sister had her boyfriend over again. I didn't like this one. On the outside, he would seem pleasant enough, but he had a cruel heart, and I would regularly catch him taunting our dog for his own amusement when he thought no one was looking. Rather than have to put up with his snide remarks and sexist comments, I decided to go for a walk. The sun had almost set as I strolled down the farm drive and took a right down the side of a wheat field. At this time of year, the wheat was around waist height, so you could still see clearly to the other side of the field. After walking about halfway down the edge of the field, I heard rustling coming from the wheat just behind me. This obviously didn't alarm me too much. There are plenty of animals that can be found in a field. As I carried on walking, I started to notice that the rustling noise did not change in volume. I never seemed to move away from it, like it was following me. At this point I stopped, as did the rustling, and I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. It was then that I noticed a small area of the wheat had been flattened, as if someone had walked over it. As I took a step forward, the area of flattened wheat grew. As I began to walk faster, a trail started to form through the wheat, just feet away from me, as if someone was walking through the wheat just behind me, or something. I began to run, my heart pounding in my chest, until I reached the next field, which had just been harvested. I didn't stop until I was about halfway into this field, before I turned and looked back. And sure enough, at the edge of my wheat field, there was a section that was flattened, as if someone had just walked through it. A cold breeze hit my face, and with my heart still pounding in my chest, I turned and ran to the end of the field and climbed the fence into the cows' pasture. I went and sat among the cows until my heart stopped thumping in my chest. They seemed perfectly peaceful in the warm evening air, and being a strong believer that animals have a sixth sense of something, for anything out of the ordinary, this calmed me. The sun had completely set now, but a large moon had taken its place by the time I decided I should begin heading home. There was no way I was taking the same route home, so I started diagonally back through the adjacent fields. As I found myself back on the farm drive and walking towards the house, it really was a peaceful evening. A chill shot up my spine as I listened. It wasn't just peaceful, it was silent. Not a rustle of the leaves in the wind, not the sound of animals going about their nightly activities. Even my footsteps seemed to be silent. I ran like hell. As I reached the back door to the farmhouse, I grabbed the doorknob and tried to open the door, but it refused to budge. The doorknob just wouldn't turn. It was then that I heard a whisper behind me, a cold breath on the back of my neck, and a bony hand upon my shoulder. I screamed and threw myself at the door, tumbling through it into the kitchen. Without even a glance over my shoulder, I got up, ran upstairs to my room, locked the door, and dived under my duvet. Somehow, even in my panicked state, I must have fallen asleep, as when I woke up, the sun was streaming through the window, and I could hear my father calling to me from downstairs. I got up, rubbing an itch on my shoulder, and ran downstairs, past my mother in the kitchen, and out of the house. He told me he had something to show me. As we walked down the farm drive towards the wheat field, I began to feel sick, and my shoulder began to itch. As we got to the edge of the field, he led me down a path of flattened wheat that led directly to the middle of the field. There, in the middle of the field, was a circle of rocks, each one taller than my father and twice as wide. The circle of 6 rocks was almost complete, except for a gap on one side where there was room for another rock. The circle. What? My father asked, looking back at me. I said, what is it? I whispered, rubbing my shoulder. He explained that they are commonly known as witches' circles. They happen from time to time and are supposedly where witches have gathered. I followed him into the center of the circle, itching my shoulder as I gazed up at each of the rocks in turn. Later that evening, whilst in the shower, I found myself rubbing my shoulder again. Something must have bitten me the previous night, as my skin felt raised and hot to the touch. I hopped out of the shower and looked in the mirror. A collection of angry-looking red dots sat on my shoulder in a perfect circle, as if I had been burnt or branded. I decided that it must have been a random cluster of fly bites that had just happened to form that shape. As I walked to my room, I stopped by my sister's room. The circle. What? She said, looking up from her bed. I said goodnight, I said as I went into my room and shut the door. That night, as I lay in my bed, I just couldn't sleep. I felt so hungry. I awoke the next morning to a cool breeze on my face and a strange metallic taste in my mouth. As I sat up, I realized I was in the wheat field, in the center of the circle of stones. I looked slowly around the circle of 6 stones. Wait, there were 7 stones now. I stared at the new stone until I noticed a small pile set at its base. Skulls. There were 3 skulls at its base, 2 roughly the same size and 1 slightly larger. I jumped back in alarm, a loud crunching noise coming from where I sat as I did. Bones. There were bones covering the inside of the circle. As I looked around, I noticed my clothes. I was completely covered in dried blood. As my eyes darted wildly around the circle, the ground beneath me began to shake. The circle is complete. The door is open. He is here.
Halloween is arguably my favorite time of year, especially as a kid. I loved being scared, even if it meant spending the next month or 2 in my parents' bedroom or hiding under my blankets in hopes to escape the witches and ghouls. Maybe my paranoia is what caused a ban on scary movies, stories, and anything of the such until my current age. One Halloween, 1995, was the most memorable for myself. This was the year I entered 3rd grade. The year itself was mostly enjoyable because of my teacher, Mr. Jones. He was full of life and spirit, creating new activities every day of school. No one had a bad word to share of him. My school is pretty special compared to others, in terms of allowing us to dress up for Halloween. Many of the staff members also partook in this tradition. Mr. Jones was no exception. I'd been excited to see his costume, considering the standards he had set for himself the years before. However, looking back, he only really dressed up as a zombie the year before. I'm not sure why my standards were so high. This year, he'd come as himself, only his body had clearly been done by a professional makeup artist. He looked completely mutilated with a knife through his stomach. The strangest thing was that no one mentioned how graphic he looked. In fact, everyone seemed gloomy. even if the day had been Halloween. Mr. Jones seemed to ignore them the same way they ignored him. He only talked to me. He constantly bothered me to follow him to the room's closet. He apparently had a special surprise for me, but unlike most students, I had respect for substitutes and sat down as soon as I was yelled at for trying to leave to the closet. This clearly upset Mr. Jones, who simply stormed out of the classroom after his sixth failed attempt to get me to follow him to the closet. He hasn't shown up since, and his substitute became permanent. It's only now that I realize why everyone looks at me insanely when I tell them my story. As I cleaned up the attic to collect anything of use on my college expedition, I noticed a pile of neighborhood newspapers, most in the year 1995. In fact, the last one in the pile was on Halloween of 1995. The top story's headline sent chills down my spine and back. It left me frozen as if all my body parts fell asleep, sort of the same way hands and feet do. Local teacher found severely mangled and stabbed in home.
Halloween night. For many people it beats the Super Bowl, Christmas, and New Year's combined. As a kid from the suburbs, personally, I wasn't really a fan. I had nothing against the holiday itself, but when you grow up seeing CSI murder scenes on every lawn come October, it becomes a little too morbid. This year was the first time in a long time I was actually excited about the holiday. I had just turned 21 the month prior and had roommates who drank like fish. With a major holiday around the corner, it meant one thing: we're getting sideways. My excitement had another reason. A girl named Liz, who I had gotten close with and had developed quite a crush on, was a Halloween fanatic. She told me that she was going to the same bar as I was with her roommates, dressed as a biker gang. Guess which show? I had been crushing on her for a long time, and after much thought and encouragement from my roommates, I decided this was going to be the night I asked her out. It was about 9 at night when me and my roommates finished getting ready. Jack, a 6'1" avid swimmer, was wearing a flannel, thick glasses, and had written, "I chopped wood before it was cool," on the blade of a fake axe. Hipster or lumberjack, he called it. Dave, 6 foot and skinny, was wearing dirty jeans, a white t-shirt, and a trash can on his head. White trash. Finally, John, a 6'3" former football player, was wearing regular clothing with a sign around his neck that said, "Nudist on strike." My costume was a robe, a wand, and a football helmet. Fantasy football. We piled into a cab after pre-gaming with a 30-pack and made the 5-minute drive to Teddy's on the Rocks, a big building with a square bar in the middle and a stage on the opposite side of the entrance. We went through the double doors and straight to the bar. I pulled out my cell phone and texted Liz to see if she was showing up. Right as I put my phone back in my pocket, speak of the devil, there was Liz and her roommates, all leather, jeans, and attitude. They saw us and immediately made their way through the crowd. We all said our hellos and regular pleasantries before jumping into conversation. The entire time, Liz was standing close enough for me to catch a whiff of her perfume every time she turned her head. It was now or never. I asked Liz to go outside and she followed me onto the back patio. We talked for a bit before I found the courage to pull the trigger. "So what do you think about going out sometime?" I asked, heart in throat. She cocked her head to one side. "Excuse me?" I stammered. "You know, like, go out to dinner or something." She then smiled at me. "Are you asking me on a date?" I took another deep breath. "Well, yeah." There was the longest pause in my life. Liz grinned, and then burst out laughing. "Oh, Mike, that's so cute. You honestly think you have a shot at me?" A pit formed in my chest. "What?" She tilted her head back and roared with laughter. "Come on, Mike. I'm at least an 8. And you? Well, you're a 4. If I'm feeling generous. It would never work." but that's so cute that you think it would." She cackled the entire way back into the bar. I stood there stupidly, with my heart, stomach, and jaw on the floor. I went back inside the bar. Was she drunk? This was not the Liz I had become so close with. I had no idea what had gotten into her. Me and her used to make fun of girls who were like that. The only thing I knew for certain was that one of my closest friends had finally shown her true self, and I was going to get blackout drunk. I sat at the bar slamming back shot after shot of high-proof whiskey. The laugh was the worst part of it. I admit I'm not the best-looking guy, but still, I was motioning towards the bartender to refill my empty shooter for the I don't know what time, when I look up from my empty shot glass. Clear across the room, she was right there, leather arms wrapped around Jack's neck. The two were kissing in the middle of the dance floor. They paused for a minute so she could put her head next to his bicep. She then looked me dead in the eyes and winked. 2 betrayals in one night. I was on a roll. I just got up and left the bar. It was only a 30-minute walk back to the dorm, and the beer and whiskey combo was keeping me warm if nothing else. I wanted to pull out my phone and call Jack and curse him out, but after patting my pockets, I realized I left it at the bar. To add insult to injury, I was going up the hill to my building, trying hard to hold back the puke. I heard the sound of breaking glass. A bottle exploded in front of me, and a car rushed by with the driver screaming, "Asshole!" I got back to my dorm room and went straight to the bathroom. I closed the door and just stared at the mirror for a bit. Asshole. The driver was right. There were no other words I was calling myself, but that one seemed to fit best. I stared at myself in my costume. I looked ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I ripped everything off with angry fists as I slid down onto the bathroom floor. That's when I heard the front door open and the voices. Jack and Dave's, to be precise. "Fuck him, dude. He's a loser," Jack said. "I can't believe he actually thought he had a chance," Dave responded with a laugh. I wanted to get up and scream at them, but I just didn't have the strength. I heard them grab something, and with a slam, they left the room. For the first time in years, I cried. I know, men don't cry, but men get the girl. Men surround themselves with loyal friends, and I was shooting 3 for 4 for fake best friends. I admitted what I truly was. Nothing. I had checked out. Player 1 has left the game. Cash in your chips and go home. That was how my Halloween night went, until I finally had the intelligence to just pass out. I woke up the next morning on the cold bathroom floor. I got up and sulked out into our common room to see John lying on the couch. He looked up at me and smiled. "You dropped this at Teddy's," he said while sliding my phone across the coffee table. "Don't be mad, dude. But Dave got wasted last night and said things," he added with a half grin. "Yeah, I heard him talking," I said bitterly. "Please tell me at least I still have John." I picked up my phone and saw the green light flashing. I saw that I had new text messages. Dave asked out Holly and she said yes. He was so happy he ended up talking to Liz for a bit. "Dude talked you up like you cured cancer," he continued. I opened the text on my phone. There was 2 messages from Liz. The first was, "Can't come down tonight. Jen's having a crisis. Stop by the room later." The second message said, "We really should talk tomorrow. Lunch?" I was so enraged that I was going to smash my phone on the floor, until I saw another text. There was a collection of, "Where are you?" messages from all of the guys and Liz's roommates. The message I was focused on was from Dave. "I got your back, dude. Just call me Brosiiden. King of the Brosian. Fuck yeah, America." I stared at the message, written in fluent drunkenese, too angry to think. I fucking heard Jack and Dave come in last night making fun of me. Liz fucking laughed in my face when I asked her out. What kind of sick shit is this? John lifted himself off the couch with a concerned, confused look. Dude, Liz didn't go out last night. She was doing some damage control boyfriend crap with Jen. Also, Dave never came back to the room. He went straight to their room after the bar and stayed the night. There's no way. I remembered everything from last night. The laughing, the bottle. We went looking for you at the bar, but Jack left early and said he saw you walking up the hill. We figured you went to bed or something. The door opened, and a smiling, still drunk Dave stumbled in. Well, if it isn't Desperado, he said with a laugh. I went to say something, but he cut me off. Dude, Liz likes you. Likes you. Giggling Japanese schoolgirl crush likes you. You better get your ass looking presentable. Your blushing bride wants to sit down. He laughed again and went to the kitchen. John shook his head. In case you don't speak Ozzy Osbourne, Liz likes you back. I stood as stupid as I had the night before, as I had thought about the night before. I heard you and Jack, I muttered. This all made no sense. I heard them. I saw them. Where is that motherfucker anyway? Dave asked, as he stumbled towards Jack's room, mug of coffee firmly in hand. I stood stunned. What had happened? This had to be a prank, one of Dave's twisted jokes. My train of thought was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. A few weeks ago, Jack was doing research on local legends for a paper. One of the stories he came across was called The Spirit's Game. Story was every year on Halloween, the dead would rise and freely roam the earth. Some of the more malevolent ones would invite the still living to play a game. It was simple. You won if you made it through what would be one of the worst nights of your life. Winners get everything they personally wish for and a lifetime of happiness. Losers join the dead. The spirits would use hallucinations, false memories, and psychological torture to try and expand their ranks. After Jack explained the rules, John and Dave agreed. Fuck that. But I thought for a moment and said, you know what? I think I'd give it a try. Jack nodded. Yeah, me too. That memory was playing over and over again in my mind. John frantically shook, a dead Jack. Vomit covered his flannel shirt, and his skin was ash gray. Dave was down the hall, screaming and pounding on the RA's door. I stared at the body of my friend. My loyal to the end friend. A half-empty bottle of vodka laid on its side, mixing with a turned-over bottle of Percocet. Jack had just as bad of a night as I had, but while I was laying down on the bathroom floor, he decided to self-medicate. On the floor of his room, liquor mixed with the pills in the same way it did in his stomach. Player 2 has left the game.
Thanks very much for watching this evening, guys. I hope you enjoyed all the videos. I will be back, funnily enough, tomorrow with another 3 narrators and 4 creepy tales. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you like, share, comment and subscribe, and check out the other narrators if you like them. I've put the details down in the description box below. So, until next time, sleep tight.